My name is Robin Troncoso. I'm the Fostering Family Grant Administrator. And I just wanted to talk about our program very quickly. Our Fostering Family program provides an assessment of needs and eligibility. We do referrals for any available services. We provide education relating to kinship care. We help with guardianship packets for school and medical services. We collaborate with legal services. We have some peer support services, and we also do referrals for behavioral management services, case management, individual and family therapy. We also have our comprehensive community support services known as CCSS that is now available. And through CCSS, we provide an individualized service plan to meet the needs of the family or yourself, including just obtaining resources for basic needs. We provide parenting or caregiving tools. We collaborate the schools, which could be working with teachers, working with counselors, participating in the IEP process, or it could just be helping get some basic study skills in place. We also do supports for in the social area, whether it's like connecting to positive activities for a child or for families. We also connect in regards to community supports. We focus on self-care and recreation. We can provide nutritional information and financial planning tools. So just a quick summary of services, but we can work with individuals across the board. So we can work with children, teenagers, and adults as well. If this sounds like something that you might be interested in, it is a Medicaid only program. We do meet once a week with a community support worker, but you could, depending on what services you need, meet on a daily basis if needed. But if you're interested, please you can contact me. Again, my name is Robin Troncoso, and I've put my email on the slide. But we're going to give you several resources for this evening. So I will include those in the chat, but then I can also send them out in an email form after our training. So for today, we're looking at kinship guardianship rights. And to start off, I wanted to just do a quick overview of the kinship guardianship Navigator Grant legal partners. So first up, we have Advocacy Inc. And Advocacy Inc. is a nonprofit organization with the mission to protect and promote the interests of at-risk children by providing low or no-cost legal and support services to New Mexican families. Through the New Mexico Guardianship Project, they provide low or no-cost legal services for guardianship, adoption, information, training, and referral. And for more information, their number is here. Again, I'll put this information in the chat, and then I provided their website. And also too, in addition to this, they do have guardianship forms available on their website. Our second legal partner is DNA People's Legal Services, and I just saw a typo, so excuse that typo. DNA People's Legal Services is a nonprofit law firm in the Southwestern United States that provides free civil legal services to low-income people who otherwise could not afford to hire an attorney. They provide legal assistance, advice, and representation in U.S. and tribal courts. They promote tribal sovereignty and offer community education programs that promote greater understanding of the law. So if this is an agency that you would like some additional supports from, they have their DNA centralized intake number available, and they also have an online application available as well. And then our third legal partner is New Mexico Legal Aid. They're also, New Mexico Legal Aid has dedicated their services to erasing barriers to justice for low-income New Mexicans by providing free and high-quality civil legal assistance and education for over 60 years. They are the largest nonprofit provider of civil legal services in the state, and they serve all 33 counties in New Mexico. For intakes through New Mexico Legal Aid, you would complete an application either online or by phone. Again, I've provided the phone number and here's the website. I'll be putting that in the chat in just a few. And they do have a link to the kinship guardianship of forms available on their website as well. And then our final partner is Pegasus Legal Services for Children. Pegasus Legal Services provide services to grandparents and other people raising children whose parents are unable or unwilling to provide them with proper care. They accept applications for services that can be completed by phone or online as well. So here's their phone number and their website. They also run the New Mexico Guardianship Legal Helpline. And the Guardianship Legal Helpline provides information, advice, and assistance to self-represented litigants in kinship guardianship cases statewide. They also provide full service direct legal representation in uncontested and contested guardianship cases statewide. So if you need help or have any questions about kinship guardianship of a child, you can call the Guardianship Legal Helpline. And this number is available for you here. And again, I'll put this in the chat. So who qualifies for services? So any relative, godparent, or a member of a child's tribe or clan, or an adult with a significant bond who are raising the youth because the biological parents are unable or unwilling to do so. Legal guardianship does not have to be established to be in our fostering family program. Again, I think like 85 to 90% of our kinship guardians that come into our program are in need of that legal support. So one of the ways that we can help is connect you to our legal partners. So again, Fostering Family Program, we're here to help. If you need any help getting connected to one of our legal partners regarding kinship guardianship issues, please contact your community support worker through the Fostering Family Program, or you can contact us online at fosteringfamily.com. I'll also have my information in the chat as well. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me. So we do have two amazing lawyers here today to talk about some legal issues. But before I introduce these ladies, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about legal ethics in New Mexico. So here's just a brief disclaimer and then we'll get started. So in New Mexico, they do not permit lawyers to answer questions regarding a case for someone who is not their client. So participating counsel can provide general information, but must not know who is asking the question. So please type your questions into the chat window and do not include any personal information. So I will we'll have our two lawyers present about some information just about kinship guardianship issues, and when they open it up for any questions at the end, I can help moderate that. We do have two contractors from Advocacy Inc. We have Petra Swartz and Diana Llewellyn. They are here today to talk about kinship guardianship legal issues.
Thank you, Robin. I'll go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'll let Diana introduce herself. Again, I'm Petra Swartz, and I'm an attorney here in Bernalillo County and also Sandoval County, and actually Valencia County. I'm in private practice. I'm a solo for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I worked as a prosecutor. And I do contract with advocacy, and part of my job with advocacy is to represent kids in foster care as a guardian ad litem and also as a youth attorney. Guardian ad litem is an attorney that represents children under 14, and a youth attorney represents children 14 and over. And I also represent young adults that have aged out of the foster care system, either weren't adopted or weren't able to go back home to their families. And so they are transitioning to adulthood on their own. And there's a program called Fostering Connections. And so I represent some young adults in those cases. Additionally, for advocacy, I do guardian ad litem work in adult guardianship cases. And I also provide what we call brief legal advice to individuals, usually grandparents, that are wanting to petition to become guardians of their grandkids. So that's just a little bit of background. Diana?
Well, I can repeat some of that and some of it I can't. My name is Diana Llewellyn. I'm also a contractor for Advocacy Inc. Most of the work that I do for Advocacy Inc. Is adult guardianships is what I've been doing lately. Many years ago, I also was a guardian ad litem. I was also a parents attorney, and I was a CCA with CYFD in the abuse and neglect system. And then for a while I was working, well, 10 years, I was working for Law Access, where I was the head of their kinship guardianship program, where we gave legal advice to low-income families over the phone. And sometimes we did brief legal services at Law Access to assist them in getting some of the paperwork in. And as Petra said, I also do some brief legal services for Advocacy Inc. at this time too. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
So what we thought we'd do is just talk about some options that relatives, grandparents have with kids that they want to take care of. And obviously a kinship guardianship is it's not like permanent, but it's probably a little bit more permanent than some of the other options. So we thought we'd talk about that and maybe some of the issues that come up. And so Diana are going to kind of tag team here, and she'll fill in where I forget something, those kind of things. But I guess the first thing I wanted to just talk about is, and some of you may already be familiar with these, but the first one is the caregiver authorization affidavit. And this is a legal document that a caregiver can fill out that allows the caregiver to enroll a child that they're taking care of, either enroll a child in school, and also to be able to consent to medical treatment. Sometimes if, say, for example, a grandparent is taking care of grandkids and the parents aren't around, and obviously kids are going to need medical care. And so this is an option that is available. It's a caregiver authorization affidavit. It doesn't take away the parent's legal rights, and the parent always continues to have their parental legal rights, but it does give the caregiver the opportunity to be able to enroll, like I said, a child in school and be able to get medical treatment for the child. The caregiver authorization affidavit is only available, or is only valid rather, for up to 1 year. And so obviously it's not a permanent thing, but it is something that is available for relatives and grandparents. Diana, did you want to add anything else about that?
Yeah, usually I think of the caregiver's affidavit as something that you are doing in the very beginning of the process, before you've gone through the kinship guardianship, because obviously if you've gotten a kinship guardianship, then the caregiver's affidavit is no longer something that you would need to do. The most important thing, I think, is to realize that it's not forever. You can't get, as Petra said, you get a caregiver's affidavit and it doesn't last forever. You'll need to renew it every year. And that's really important. There are some things that you can do when you are in the position where you just have a caregiver's affidavit. There are other laws out there like McKinney-Vento that help you get kiddos registered for school and to Also, you can get other benefits and things like that for the kiddos, but it is not in any way a restriction on the parents' parental rights at that point in time.
And the other thing I was going to add too is that with the caregiver affidavit, there is a section on the affidavit that asks whether or not you've contacted or gotten the consent of the parent, and you don't necessarily need that. Whereas the next one that I'm going to talk about, a power of attorney, and I think probably a lot of you are familiar with powers of attorney in adult situations, but when it comes to a child, a parent could give a power of attorney to another person, to a relative or a grandparent. A power of attorney, when it involves a child, is valid for up to 6 months. And a power of attorney also, it doesn't take away the parent's legal rights. And the parent obviously has to authorize it and can take it back at any time or could renew it. And as far as a power of attorney, the parent can authorize what they want the person that's going to have this power of attorney to do. Or, it could be just to have this person be able to access medical care for the child. It could be the ability to enroll them in school. It could be all kinds of things. It could be more, but it's really up to the parent. And again, the parent has to authorize it, has to sign it, and it's valid for up to 6 months when it involves a child. Diana, you want to add anything to that?
The only thing to add is that in order for someone to give you a power of attorney, they have to be have capacity to be able, or competency to be able to do so.
Correct, right. So then the last one is obviously a kinship guardianship. And although it's not permanent in that it can be revoked or taken back, there is a process that one would have to go through to do that, and you have to go to court to take it back. But a kinship guardianship gives the guardian pretty much the rights that a parent would have, except for they can't consent to a child's adoption, but they are in the place of the parent making decisions regarding the child's care, decisions regarding school, pretty much everything that a parent would decide. Through a kinship guardianship, you would be able to do that. The child or the children do have to live with the caregiver for at least 90 days before they can apply for the guardianship or the kinship guardianship. And as I said, it is a little bit more permanent, with the exception that it can be revoked if a parent or a child over 14 wants it to be revoked, and then they have to go to court to be able to revoke that. Diana, you want to add anything to that?
Yes, there's when kiddos reach the age of 14, they can also nominate who they wish to be their kinship guardian. And unless there is a reason not to, the court tries to accommodate the child in order to pick that person, to have that person there. The other thing is, when I was explaining it to people, I would always say that the difference between being a kinship guardian and being a guardian is that a kinship guardian is merely a suspension of the parent's rights. And a regular guardian, or the other kind of guardian, is where their parents' rights have been terminated. And so that's something to keep in mind. The rights that you are given as a kinship guardian, as Petra said, it's everything except being able to consent to adoption, unless there's something in the document from the court that the court has also limited. So your court documents are extremely important. You must read them. You must understand what they say. If you don't know, then ask somebody, because those are the documents that control the rights and responsibilities that you have. And it's always important to know that kind of information. In addition to that, when you go through the process, when you want to file for a petition for kinship guardianship, you can seek a temporary guardianship because there's a certain amount of time between when you file your petition than when you get that. And oftentimes that can be a scary time period, because until you have that kinship guardianship, the parents can come and take the child away. And if the child is taken out of your care, you can no longer continue your petition for kinship guardianship. They have to be continually living with you for 90 days beforehand and all the way through the process as well. You're supposedly, unless it's restricted by the court documents, you would determine what the visitation with the parents were at that point in time, unless there's another court document or your court documents say that there are specific visitation times. And so in that time period where you've got your 90 days before you get your final kinship guardianship, you can apply for a temporary guardianship, which can last up to 180 days. And it can kind of carry you over that portion where you're a little bit vulnerable, especially if the relationship with the parents is strained. And if they find out once they get served with a petition that you've got the kiddos and you're doing this, they may want to come and take the kiddos, which they can, because you have no right to restrict them at that point in time, unless there's already a court order in place. And so if you have temporary guardianship, it prevents the removal of the child, which would then prevent the stalling of getting the kinship guardianship. But again, that's also just a temporary order. And so that's something to keep in mind. And most of you, as I understand it, already have kinship guardianship. And so, but if there are some of you out there who are interested in how to get that and what there might be some issues before you actually get it, that's one thing to keep in mind as well. And the other thing that Petra mentioned was that if the parents decide after the kinship guardianship is in place that they want to try and get it revoked, then they would file a petition to revoke. And so then there's another legal process involved. And so it's not like they can just say, oh, I want the kiddos back, or you and the parents decide if you think that they should have the kiddos back, oh, I'll just give the kiddos back. It doesn't work that way. There's a legal process to create it, and there's a legal process to, for lack of a better word, uncreate it. And so that's also something that's important, that you are invoking the jurisdiction of the court. The court has continuing jurisdiction throughout this process. And so that means that changes that come up that would be changing any legal status, it requires going back to court. And I can't think.
Can I just jump in real quick and let Ginny Silva is here from Advocacy Inc. as well, and she's been adding the forms that both Petra and Diana have been talking about into the chat. So just so everybody knows.
Thank you. I just want to add or stress what Diana mentioned about the order, the final order on kinship guardianship. And that order is really important. I think that's something that I like to stress because, if it's not in the order, then certain issues might come up like visitation. I don't know that that's always in the order because the guardian has the decision making as far as visitation. But if there's something that a person feels like needs to be understood or be clarified or really needs to be laid out, I think it's just really important that it be in the order. So for any of you that are in the process of applying, I think that's just a really important thing because, you just never know. And if parents come back in the picture or they're more involved and there's going to be issues that you're concerned about, if those can be in the order, that really does help.
And the other thing too is you can request to get child support payments from the parents as part of it. And so it would need to be in your documents, your court documents, that you are getting that. It's not something that automatically happens. And if you don't get it this way through this document, I don't know, and Petra, we talked about this, whether or not you can petition the regular way to get child support as opposed to having it in this kinship guardianship document. And I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So if you're seeking child support, you can ask that it be included in the final order. And a lot of times, I don't know, Diana, from your experience, but from mine, a lot of times parents haven't been paying child support or helping out with the kids in any way. So that is something that that is really important if you can get it in the order.
Yes.
I think it's more complicated waiting till later and trying to go through that process. So that would be another thing, definitely. I do want to also mention, Diana, and I'm glad Ginny's here. Ginny's wonderful at advocacy. She kind of keeps us all coordinated and pops up with forms when we need them and all kinds of information. But one of the things that I do, as I mentioned earlier, and just let everybody know, is that, like I said, we do provide basic legal services, advice as for people that are applying for kinship guardianship. And we do help people to, we explain the forms because they can be complicated. And there's quite a few forms. So we go with you, we go through that process. We can't represent you in court, but we do help you so that you can go to court and have all the documents. I've had people that I've talked to that went to district court and came back like on their own like 4 times because the district court took the form and then they said, oh, this is wrong, but didn't, you know, they can't really tell them what's wrong. But so then they had to go back and then they're trying to figure out what they need to do. So that's an area that we can help with, that we can help guide you to let you know what you need to do, how you need to make sure to word things so that the judge understands why you're seeking the kinship guardianship. And I think that those legal forms that you're filling out are really important to be able to let the judge know the history and why you're seeking this, because obviously the judge is not going to know the person or know the kids and know the circumstances. So to have the succinct information and explain the history and all that on those forms are the kinds of things that we try to assist you with. Diana, do you want to add anything to that?
I just want to add something else about kind of a tag on about the parents contributing to the kiddos. If the child has come to you because they were removed from their parents and then placed with you, whether it was a voluntary placement or a judicial determination that it should be given to you, there are other kinds of financial subsidies that you could get. And those are part of the statute as well. And in order to get those, you know, as I said, the child has to have been removed from their home and pursuant to the voluntary placement or as a result of a judicial determination. CYFD is usually in those situations involved, and that's where these financial subsidies come into play. And so if you're appointed through the kinship guardianship, then there are different kinds. And there are things that are non-recurring expenses. And again, this is not my area of expertise, but I just wanted you to be aware that there are these other financial resources possibly available. And that should be something that you should check into if the child was, as I say, not just something where your grandma and grandpa have been raising the child, but there has been some interaction with CYFD out there and other judicial orders that occurred prior to you getting the kiddo. Okay, so that's something else I just want to have in there. Oh, and the other part that I wanted to say is before we leave is, if you're the kinship guardianship and something happens and you can't do it, and you have someone else who wants to step in, they have to go through the same process that you did originally. It's not just, oh, I want cousin Linda to take over. It doesn't work that way. Again, they have to go through the process and get vetted by the court and a determination made that it's an appropriate substitution. So just to keep that in mind.
All right. So again, Janice put some forms and they're also available on the advocacy website. And so feel free if you are in that process or you know somebody that may need to apply for a kinship guardianship. Again, advocacy is available to help. I think Tammy also from advocacy is here. Tammy's wonderful. She is one of the individuals at advocacy that can help in terms of referring to the contract attorneys that work with advocacy to see how we can help. I guess we can open up to some questions, Diana. Is that okay? Or you have anything else you want to add?
The questions may trigger something, so.
Okay.
Okay. So if a grandmother has temporary legal guardianship, but the child stays with the auntie Monday through Friday because the grandmother doesn't have the time or ability to take the child to school, can the aunt get something to allow the aunt to register the child in her school district or take the child to the doctor?
So the grandmother is the guardian, but the child stays with an aunt during the week.
Yeah, and it looks like the grandmother only has temporary legal guardianship.
And what does that mean? Does that mean there's actually a legal document that has said that you have temporary legal guardianship prior to getting kinship guardianship? Or is it just that the child has been left with you? Because that can make a difference too.
Let's wait for a second to see if there's any response and clarification on that. Yes, the grandmother has temporary legal guardianship.
Okay, so then that means that the grandmother has all the legal rights of a parent at that point in time, meaning that as a parent, if you were in grandmother's shoes, and then you would be able to have the child stay with another relative or a friend or whomever, because that's your right as a parent to decide that and allow them to do that. As far as documentation can go with grandmother being the temporary legal guardian, she can call the school and she can talk to the school about putting auntie on the list of authorized persons to pick up the child, take the child, that sort of thing. And the same would be with the physician. It would not, there's not any other kind of legal relationship between auntie and the child. Grandmother has that. Grandmother has the legal relationship with the child, but as the person holding that legal relationship, she can delegate some things just like any other parent could.
A caregiver has kinship guardianship until 18 or court orders otherwise of an 8-year-old. Is the kinship guardian allowed to move out of state?
Again, this is as a kinship guardian, you're acting like the parent. You're in essence have all the responsibilities of a parent to make decisions. And so if someone, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, but if, for example, there's a job opportunity or something like that, and they have to move out of state, if parents are involved and if parents object to it, they still have to go through the process of revoking. But, as long as there's a legitimate legal kinship guardianship there, again, the person is acting like a parent and making those decisions. So Diana, do you think otherwise?
No, the only thing I would be saying is that if there's court-ordered visitation, you would not be able to remove the child from the state if it would disrupt the court-ordered visitation. So again, what's in your court orders and whether or not you have been limited in any fashion from being in your kinship guardianship, that's going to control the kinds of things that you can do. Kinship guardianship only lasts till they're 18. And so that's the other thing to keep in mind. If at that time there's a need for a continuing guardianship, you would have to go on and do an adult guardianship. But kinship guardianship is limited to when the kiddos are 18. And then there's another process that would be a different kind of guardianship that would come in as well. But as far as removing from the state, again, that depends on whether or not you would be disrupting any rights that the biological parents have or the court has ordered you to comply with.
Does CYFD on the state provide legal representation to guardians, or is it up to the guardians to secure their own legal representation?
So if the child is in CYFD custody or in CYFD's care, and there is a guardianship that is being considered, CYFD does help to provide an attorney to advise the proposed guardians. I don't work for CYFD, so I can't answer all the questions regarding CYFD, but generally from my experience, and I believe it's in their policies that they do provide, they have like a list of attorneys and that they contract through the state. And the purpose of those attorneys is to advise the potential guardians about their rights and what's involved, those sort of things. Diana?
Another question, what criteria is required to be considered a fictive kin?
Well, fictive kin is a relative, or it can be someone that had, and I think there's a more clear definition, Diana, and you can add to it, but it can also be someone that a child has had, may not be related by blood, but has had a long or strong type of relationship with. Fictive kin can also be considered someone like that, but there is a specific definition, and it's just not, I can't think of it at the top of my head. I don't know, Diana, if you can remember.
Started talking without unmuting myself. There are definitions in the kinship guardianship, and they talk about kinship means the relationship that exists between a child and a relative of the child, a godparent, a member of the child's tribe or clan, or an adult with whom the child has a significant bond. And so that's pretty inclusive in there. And there's also somewhere else in here, which I haven't pulled up, where they kind of expand on the idea of fictive kin, but it goes back to whether or not there's that significant bond within child. You don't have to be biologically related in order to get a kinship guardianship. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not sure that helped at all.
Definitely. No, that's good. And I think too, for our kinship guardians this evening, really like taking some time to explore the websites that we provided for the legal partners, because you see these definitions, and that might help you like give you a little bit of time to kind of like read up on the definitions. And then, if you need to call any of the agencies, you can follow up with your questions. Another question we had is it possible to get guardianship / adopt if the child is in CYF custody and parents have not seen the baby for 2 months?
If the child is in CYFD custody, let me start with this. It depends how long the child has been in CYFD custody. The goal when children come into foster care, the goal is always reunification, trying to keep the family together. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes parents aren't able to do what they need to do to be able to get a child back. So I think it just depends. It depends. Every case is different. Circumstances are different. But parents have certain rights, and they have to be given the opportunity to, if, for example, the child is in CYFD custody because of whatever problems that the parents are having, they have to have the opportunity to work on those problems and be given the opportunity to reunite with the child. So, and that can vary, sometimes it can take longer, sometimes not as long. So it just really, really depends. Diana, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that we haven't said, but it's kind of resting in the back of my mind, is if the child is Native American, is eligible or is registered with a tribe or eligible to be read, there are additional requirements for these children because they have a special legal status. And so that is also something that you need to be aware of and take into consideration in these cases. But other than that,
And it's so interesting because all of these cases are just so unique, and all of the different, the situations, the caregivers involved, the stories, why the child has come into kinship care is all very different. So again, I think, this is more for generalized questions, but if you are having a situation, I think that involves a lot of details. I think the best thing to do is to call one of our legal partners, who are providing the kinship guardianship support, and do a consult with them, and they can help guide you in this way to, what your next step should be. If you need to fill out paperwork, what that looks like, you can set up appointments. They can go over the court process with you. I think, like Petra said earlier, it does take a while. And so, getting that support and getting the questions answered regarding any of the forms is just such a huge benefit.
Robin, just real quickly too, just to add to that is one of the things I think sometimes it can be frustrating to, have to fill out all these forms and then make sure that they're filled out correctly and then wait for a court hearing. And it can be a lengthy process. And I mean, I think we can all understand and see that the legal system in itself can be complicated. So, if we can help in just trying to make it as basic and simple and answering questions, because the forms, if you've never looked at those forms, they can be a little bit overwhelming, and and they give you all these forms, or you can print them off the website, and some people just don't know like even where to start, and how to fill it out, or who to put as a respondent, those kind of things. So it's just things like that we can help you with to kind of help navigate those forms.
In regards to forms, how long have you seen like the form process take, if you had to give an estimate? And I know it can be depending upon like the flow of the court, but have you seen an average time between getting like the guardianship packets in and what that looks like?
So usually, I don't know, Diana, like when I help individuals, and mostly they've been grandparents, once, I help them to in explaining the forms and what they need to do, and getting all their copies, and getting them to the court. I might hear back from them and just say they got everything turned in, but I don't usually know when they get a court hearing. If a child is in CYFD custody, sometimes, that process can take a while before it's all finalized. I mean, I can kind of, and that varies too. It can just vary case to case. So I don't know, Diana, if you have any experience with that.
sorry, I'm having trouble finding my mute button. When you file a petition, it gets served on the other parties, and that can make a difference too, because if they're difficult to find or you can't get them legally served, that could add some time to it as well. So that's, the other thing that I saw most often was actually getting the respondents or the parents served was a time-consuming activity. If you never can get them personally served and you're going to end up serving them other ways, that also can add some additional time. So again, it's that service of process that can be unpredictable.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking time to come and share this information with our kinship guardians. It's just been so helpful to kind of clarify the different processes, the different forms. Again, and for our kinship guardians, we've put a lot of contact information in our chat. I will also forward it out to you so you have the phone number and contact information for Advocacy Inc., DNA People's Legal Services, New Mexico Legal Aid, and Pegasus Legal Services for Children, as well as the Guardianship Legal Helpline.